So, welcome everyone. My name is Bob Leonard. I teach in theater and cinema in the School of Performing Arts at Virginia Tech. And it's just really amazing to have you all here in the third of three sessions in this colloquium this spring. The talks and exchanges by nationally recognized artists and leading thought leaders are a core piece of the MFA theater program graduate seminar. They bring perspectives, insights, experience, hope, strategy, and their spirit into the studies of the next generation of theater makers here at Tech. We've discovered that these exchanges about art and community, how art serves to build community and engages with civic dialogue, serve the interests of folks well beyond the classroom. It's just great that you all are here either in person or on Zoom. The unique experiences and valuable and national perspectives of these leaders have direct and immediate impact on how we understand and utilize the arts in our own communities, large and small, across the country. For our audiences on Zoom, please feel free to use the chat feature to communicate. We'd appreciate if you will respect our request to remain muted unless invited to unmute. Please share your thoughts, your questions, or your desire to speak on chat. That way we can keep order to our exchange. And Ashley Cooper is going to be managing chat, so you can check in with Ashley. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. Megan Carney is the artistic director of About Face Theatre, a company dedicated to advancing LGBTQ+ equity through community building, education, and performance. Megan's work as a director, deviser, teacher, facilitator has led projects to premiere in Chicago, New York, and through multiple touring productions. In addition to focusing on new plays, Megan has created multiple works through ensemble processes and collected interviews, including 2020, a celebration of queer activism in Chicago, done at About Face Theatre. Women at War, a revelation of experiences in military deployment and reentry, Rivendell Theatre. Open Systems, an examination of migration and change after Hurricane Katrina at the Goodman Theatre. She is a founder of About Face Youth Theatre and is committed to multi-generational learning and movement work. From 2011 to 2017, Megan served as the director of Gender and Sexuality Center at the University of Illinois in Chicago. There she produced cultural programs and advanced affirming policies in collaboration with others in the Centers for Cultural Understanding and Social Change. She has volunteered with the Chicago Foundation for Women's LGBT Giving Council, Chicago Restroom Access Project, the Pride Action Tank, and other organizations. Her work has been recognized with industry awards as well as the GLSEN Pathfinder Award and APA Presidential Citation and induction into Chicago's LGBT Hall of Fame. Megan has received an MFA in Theater Arts from Virginia Tech with a focus on directing and public dialogue, and a BA from Kalamazoo College. It's really wonderful to have you here and have you back here. Please join me in welcoming Megan Carney.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bob.
You bet.
It is such a joy to be here. I love every opportunity to get back to Blacksburg. Virginia Tech's really special to me, and you especially, Bob. And I was sharing when the email came through with this invitation, it was just a great day for the year. And I thought, well, I'm really gonna look forward to that. I did not expect to have snow when I arrived in April. So that's been a little shocking, but otherwise. And Ashley, thank you so much for your hosting and all the good communications. Really appreciate that. Helped me really get set up here. And Laura for having us at the library. I feel so fortunate that we've got good public libraries, right? We really need you now. Thanks for everything you're doing. Hi to everyone on Zoom. I can see you up here, but I know I'm supposed to look at you here. I've got some family here, some friends far and wide, and welcome. There is, when I was thinking about what to share today, I really wanted to leave a space for discovery together, to create some opportunities for us to pause and reflect together. So for those of us in the room, we'll sort of pair off and talk a little bit and share back. And for those of you on Zoom, if you're with someone, you can do the same. If you're on your own, maybe it's a little writing reflection to share back in the chat. We'll just adapt and see how it goes. And I also wanted to start off saying, you know, the last time I was here was just this fall to celebrate the life of Ann Kelly, who was a dear mentor and phenomenal artist who taught me so much about community-based work. And I know Anne would want us to have fun today. She would want us to just get into it and enjoy this time together. So I just want to invite her spirit into this space. When I was thinking about, you know, how to use this precious time together, I was thinking about a lot about the essence of, you know, what it is to create a new show. And when you're working in ensemble, of course, every person comes in with, I'll bring my own ideas of what I think about the topic, where I think it should go. Maybe I even have a map of, I think we should get from here to here to here. But the best ideas come up when the group gets together. And collectively, we start thinking and exploring and investigating it. And I've been thinking a lot about the role of relationships and imagination in this moment for us. And also, especially in creating lasting change. When we think about how does change really happen and what's the role of the arts? I've just been digging into the idea of what is the power of relationships and the potential of imagination around that. So I want to keep teasing that out today. And this idea of getting together kind of brings us to this idea of community, which is in the series title, this word community, that I know I use a lot, and I mean a lot of different things when I say that word. So I thought it might be interesting to start off talking about that word together. The word community, when you look it up in a dictionary, is basically, you know, people who are gathered together around shared ideas or shared goals. It could also mean a fellowship, a sense of fellowship together. But let's stop first for a moment and just reflect on the communities that we're a part of and think about the different communities that you're a part of, however you define that. And I would love to hear from some folks about what is common for you across those experiences. Moving beyond the definitions into just something more personal and experiential. When you think about your communities, what does it mean for you?
Safety.
Safety.
Shared identity.
Shared identity, right?
Language, but like sort of shorthand,
Yeah.
implicit language.
Yeah. Language. That's shorthand.
Fun.
Fun, yeah. Yeah. Belonging. Have you ever been in a group that you thought you should fit in with, but then you didn't? What was missing? What was missing? Or what happened?
Vulnerability,
Yeah,
a willingness to be vulnerable.
Or that lack of common language. You know, I don't know what's going on here.
yeah. I thought these were my people, except, yeah.
Using language that sounds right, but not living it.
Mhm. Oh, like a performance of community almost, but not really an authentic connection.
Cynthia, not on chat says, a willingness to accept responsibilities.
Mm,
And I guess those times when I didn't feel I belonged was when I experienced that not being the case.
yeah. Yeah,
Irene also shared a lack of empathy and kindness.
mhm,
Focus on hierarchy.
okay, yeah,
Not stereotypical enough.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
yeah, great. Well, these are such beautiful descriptors of that feeling or that experience, because it's almost like if we applied those into a different definition, maybe those are healthy communities that provide those things that we just named. And it could look like different things in different places when we set out for different goals. But I love centering that in this conversation about art being healthy, being a part of a healthy community, and the specificity of that. Because we are in this time of searching, I think, for the next thing of where are we going? What happens now? And in some ways, how do we go on after what we've all been through? And I was inspired during the pandemic by this article by the Indian novelist Arundhati Roy. I don't know if you came across this piece called "The Pandemic is a Portal." This is an excerpt from that article. And as I read this, I just want to invite you to think about what images come up for you while you hear this. Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, quotes, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. What images come up for you when you hear that? Anything spark?
Like thresholds, like if you're willing to walk over a threshold.
Nice. Hope.
Also just how awkward you feel when you're carrying lots of different pieces of luggage.
Oh,
Like that's such an awkward physical feeling.
yes. Yes.
I was imagining walking backwards
Okay.
through that portal.
Yeah.
It was like, Walter Benjamin talked about walking backwards in the future. And said, you're always looking at the past, but you're moving essentially blindly
Yeah.
ahead. And how difficult it is to let those things go, even the things that you know are bad about the way things move.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though we know they're bad, we want to let them go. It's hard. Some things are hard to let go of. I hear the effort in that. Yeah.
I was surprised at the end
Uh-huh.
To have to fight. I think what you're talking about, I recognize the hard effort
Yeah.
to do. But I personally want to work into a portal that doesn't ask me to fight.
Yes. We can arrive.
A new world where that is not the bottom line credential.
Yes, let's revise this. Eliminate the fighting, yeah,
Not the hard work.
right, right. That we could walk through lightly, ready to imagine another world. Yeah, and I like that she uses the word we, because none of us does this alone, right? And she says, ready to imagine. And I have noticed for myself, that I'm becoming more and more interested in how we as artists and people dedicated to creating spaces for people to gather, how we can support each other to access imagination. Because when we're suffering or struggling or under-resourced or in pain, it's hard to have that access, right? To the space to say, well, what if, what could it be? But I like thinking about that these days of the role of the arts and educators and people who, I'm looking at you, Laura, librarians, creating this space for that work to happen. I think we have a special capacity for that. So that as a setup, I wanted to share kind of two thoughts about how I've been thinking about art and the role of healthy community. One is reflecting on myself and ourselves, starting with the personal, and then shifting into collective action. What does that look like? And when I studied here, Patty Ron was one of my mentors, and Patty was teaching the Acting for Non-Majors class, and she taught me about an activity called River Stories. Does everybody here know what River Stories is now? That's like in the water of the department now, I'm sure. And I just loved it. And it kind of informed how I did this. So for those of you familiar, you can kind of embed that when you think, because I'm sort of meandering down a river of memories and different moments. For people who don't know River Stories, it's a combination of guided meditation and writing and performing moments from your life story that come up. And it is a really beautiful way to build ensemble and hone your performance chops, right? So this river story, and I invite you all to think about this with me, this river story is really centered around who taught you what you know about the world and your approach to doing what you do. So those in the theater program, your approach to making art, who taught you what you know and your approach to that. So here's some of mine. Family. I grew up about 300 miles north of here, if you follow the mountains, up in Pittsburgh, in a loving family that loves books and sports and getting together to talk about books and sports, and also singing and also eating and being together. And my parents and their parents passed all that on to me, and education was important. And growing up while continuing to learn was also really important, really valuable in our family, and really understood as part of a lifelong journey. Cindy McNulty, who's on the Zoom. Cindy was my high school English teacher and is now a dear friend who I invited to come. And Cindy helped me build on that natural love of books and added analysis and context and an understanding of how art can reflect the world. Organizing, grassroots organizing. In high school, I learned about grassroots organizers and social justice movements, and was part of these intergenerational collectives, and we would fight for reproductive justice and an end to apartheid. And we went to DC as part of peace marches. And I don't remember the names of those teachers, but I can still see their faces. And I remember the songs they would sing, and I remember chanting with them at demonstrations. And these are just images of things that informed me and shaped along the way. K College, where I went to undergrad, Ed Menta was my primary teacher there. I studied theater at K College in the context of liberal arts. So it was embedded in me at that time that theater and history and social studies and math and literature all kind of sat together. And that would all shape the play you picked and why you picked it and when you picked it and how you did it. And that context of that and the current political moment got embedded for me then. The urban studies programs. After I moved to Chicago, I started working as a teaching artist for several years. And I got to work alongside some incredible people in that time. Mary Scott Oria and Dorothy Burge are two people that I worked with in the Great Lakes College Association. We worked with students from all around the Midwest. And they would arrive from all of these small towns and drop down into Chicago, and they would move into these apartments and neighborhoods all over the city. And I was one of the people who would help them interpret what they were experiencing in the city. And I moved to Chicago without that experience, so I'm aware that I was learning while they were learning, and I was learning and passing on to them in very quick succession, and it was a really great experience. Joe Carson. Around that time, I started writing plays based on true stories. I met someone named Richard Owen Gear, who was running Scrap Metal Soul, a theater company in the Parks District in Chicago. And he introduced me to Joe Carson, who's from Johnson City, Tennessee. Joe passed some time ago now. She became a mentor to me very generously. She let me into her process of how she wrote plays. And she had a wild process. They would drop down into a town and interview dozens of people, and then take all of those stories and weave it into some kind of narrative of a play with stories and songs. Casts of 50 or more people telling the story of a town. Joe taught me something very specific about how to use index cards to write large manuscripts, which I still use to this day. And she also taught me a lot about, if I wanted to be an artist working in what we call community-based practice or working in community, that in addition to learning a lot of new things, I also needed to unlearn a lot of things that I had been taught at that time. And Joe framed that as getting housebroken, like a new puppy who moves into the house, getting trained up to live a little differently, you know, and it sometimes felt like it was, you know, it was, wait, I thought it was this, or I thought it was good to do this, or wait, but now I'm supposed to do that. And there were a lot of lessons that happened while doing the deal and learning while I went along. That was incredibly valuable. And some of the things that came up, I knew I needed to learn to get more transparent about the process and how to do the thing. And I also needed to learn to let go of control of a lot of things in order to let my world and my art making get bigger. The next stop on this meandering river story journey is About Face Youth Theater. So I was in Chicago for a little while I was working with Scrap Metal Soul, and there were a couple artists who came out of Northwestern Performance Studies program who founded a company called About Face Theater. This was in the mid-90s. And their vision was to bring LGBTQ stories from the margins to center stage. And at that time, anytime you would come across a gay character, they were literally the butt of the joke, or the goofy neighbor, or the eccentric relative who comes in for a visit. You know what I mean? There weren't really plays that centered LGBTQ folks that weren't also rooted in very deep traumas. And the vision of the company was, could we expand how we understand our lives and create a new canon around those ideas? So a couple years into that company's work, I met those founders, and we combined forces to create an education program that we called About Face Youth Theater. And the best way to describe it today for me is to say it was one of those experiences, maybe you've had these too, where it felt like we made the path by walking it. That it was discovering while we moved week to week, day to day, what the next thing was gonna be. So we were a team of artists, designers, writers, directors, improvisational performers, who partnered with social service providers, counselors and therapists, historians from the university, safe sex educators, housing advocates, who would all come through the workshops. And we used techniques of storytelling that we pulled on from a lot of different methodologies and backgrounds as the core. And then we always created space for those special guests to come through. And young people from all around the Chicagoland region, between 14 and 20 years old at that time. The definition of youth has changed since then, but that's what we used then. And we would create those communities. We met in churches. We met in community org basements, rehearsal rooms, all over the map, scrapping it together. The shows were stunning and beautiful and designed with professional artists. And also the point was the play plus this whole extended thing that we were trying to do, you know? And the context, what I was talking about before of context and history in a certain historical moment, I am aware that that project would not have been possible even 10 years before that moment. At that time, a couple of things were going on. There was the tragedy of Matthew Shepard's murder that happened that was documented in the Laramie Project, among many other things. But that tragedy sparked a national conversation where people of a lot of different kinds of lives and regions kind of tuned in to the violence that LGBTQ people were facing. And it galvanized a lot of movement work in schools specifically, where gay straight alliances really started springing up in the early 2000s. And I say all that because it also attracted funding, which created jobs for some of us to have full-time jobs in the arts and really dedicate ourselves to doing that work over the course of time and really fine-tuning the model to a year-round program and then touring into schools and on and on and on. So there's lots of stories related to that, but I wanted to slow down around that because I know there's makers here and you're doing similar kind of stuff. When I stepped down from that job is when I came here to Virginia Tech. So the next people on my list are Bob and Ann, Bob Leonard and Ann Kilkelly. I came here to study with you, Bob. And this was a place for me where so many of the influences I've talked about so far and the sources I've talked about so far really came together. And I got that shorthand you were talking about, that vocabulary, that language, that sense of, oh, that goes to that. And oh, is that how I connect with that? Oh, and you know that too. And what else should I be reading? And it was a really fertile, exciting time. And what rose up for me to share today also among the many different things that happened during that time and the work that we got to make, Kim and I got to collaborate on a project together, was that in terms of my own personal journey, I had a chance to step into a reflective zone and make things in a different place and learn so much about myself and learn to unpack a little bit of how I had been working some more. So I guess that is the theme, the unlearning, the unpacking, the resetting, the evolution that happens. And there was a day when Bob handed me an article called White Supremacy Culture. And we talk about that more now, but that was a phrase that you didn't hear much at that time, you know? And the evolution of the people who wrote that article is now a very advanced website. Maybe you've seen it. That's been kind of renamed as Divorcing White Supremacy Culture and Coming Home to Who We Really Are. And they've created a very elaborate website of resources and frameworks and references that's incredible. What seemed relevant for today was those characteristics: perfectionism, urgency, individualism, excellence, objectivity, the right way to do things. Those are a lot of the hallmarks of the culture of nonprofit arts that I had been really deeply steeped in up until that moment. And that feels important to talk about, that there's a certain way of learning how to get the funding and do the thing and file the report and stay on track and that can be very harmful. And there are roots of that in our field and in our sector and in the way the money works. And that's something I continue to work on and puzzle through, because there are a lot of rewards for working that way. And I think that we're in a moment where there's an undoing of a lot of that happening. But we're in the labor part of that. We're in the effort part of that and the resistance part of that. And also, while I was here, I got to meet Marty Pottinger. And Patty and Bob reached out to Marty to come as a special guest when I was here. And Marty taught me this idea about how to think about community-based work and devising original projects, which was to think of each project as a progressive series of activities. She would use that word, tiers of activity. And that would go from concept to interview, to workshop, to production, each step valuable, each one whole unto its own. And, you know, we have that debate: process, product, what's more important, how do you balance? And Marty was like, all of it, you know? And it was such a relief just to embrace all of it, you know? So that the interview, if you get to do a project based on interviews, that interview is the thing, you know? And then if the interview becomes another thing, that is also the thing, you know? But that's part of that, letting it all be valuable and important, and gave me all these gifts of being more present to the work and not rushing the work to get to the thing, which is the opening night moment of that, how our work is sometimes crafted. It's like, push, open the show, you know? And that's fun, you know, the adrenaline really helps us get there sometimes, but aren't all those other things also just the best, you know? And that reminder always helps me structure it that way. So like, if I'm thinking about a project, maybe the culminating opening night's a year and a half out from now, how do I start staging out so those early meetings, that part of the process is rich and valuable and nourishing, even if that means it changes what happens later, you know, just letting it kind of evolve. Okay, those are my snapshots. Those are my sources, influences, the people that taught me so much that built to this moment. And so I want to pause and I want to ask you to think about the people in your life who did that for you. And given the time we have, I'm going to say, let's pair up and let's each person take 2 minutes to share whatever you want to share, no pressure, you know, and then we'll come back together and we'll just take a little bit of time to share back to the group. Does that sound good? Are you up for it? Zoomers, are you up for it? All right, cool. All right, I will keep the time. That'll be my job. So pair up, maybe someone you don't know in here. I love saying that, but whatever's easy. And let's go. That's true. 2 minutes. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So what?
No, so she was from the. Was on my under my skill, that's all I have.
And Zoomers, if you want to share in the chat, go for it.
That's what I'm hoping. So, yes. But that's
Great.
So, like, so enjoying we got there, so we've never done it, so I was like, like, I'll do it, that goes all on. And I'm like, let's do it. And then last year, I had a skill here, and so much.
We got about a minute left.
So, no, that whole, so that's what's going on.
Yeah.
This is the majority of adults. I had never experienced it. I got to shake it up. I'm thinking what I think.
If you haven't swapped, you want to swap. Got about a minute left.
Nothing on top of it, right? But
Yes.
you know. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, that's been.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, we connected in Japan.
Whoa, you know. Was not great. No. But it wasn't very much.
You just want to wrap up wherever you are, finish your thoughts.
Yeah, we're,
That is more than research assignment.
Okay.
fun part.
So I'm curious to hear from people, just together, we'll kind of share a little bit of time of pulling out little excerpts of what came up for you, but does anyone have something you want to share with the group? A person you remembered or a moment of feeling changed or shaped by somebody?
This is it's not a hugely positive one, but there was a leader as I was growing up that I think a lot of my kind of leadership / connection is built in antithesis to the way that they did it. Because I saw at a very early age, like how much hurt could come from doing it that way and felt the hurt. And so, like, as I've gotten older, it has become more clear that like, that was a huge turning point for myself as an artist and as a leader.
Yeah, thank you. Learning what not to do.
Yeah.
We didn't follow the instructions.
I love that.
We were talking about what was swirling around in our head
Yeah,
based on your storytelling.
okay.
So what did we identify and in my new role, and actually, I guess I reflected on several roles. I've started new things. And I'm always looking for the pinnacle. When do I know that program is successful? When do I know that we've made it, right? And I'm in a brand new program, 4 months in, and I'm like, wait a minute. So the stopping and reflecting and enjoying the moment, knowing that it's also going to take 3 to 5 years to get to success. And I won't know in the 3 to 5 years, but yet, and I focus on now. While also keeping in mind the 3 to 5 years. So that's what was swirling around my head that we talked about.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, I'll provide a different experience. So libraries are all about community and education, and even though I'm the branch manager and I should worry about numbers, I do worry about numbers, but I also look at the micro, because even if I only reach one person, that's one person. And so that's what, to me, and we were talking about communities, when people talked about the commonalities of community and people coming together. I think about communities as a system and celebrating the differences, knowing that there are differences, but celebrating the differences and working and shaping each other. So to me, that's what, and I know I sound like a passionate zealot, and I am. Libraries, I think, are one of the last true democratic spaces for everyone to come together.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts?
Irene shared in the chat. I realized that the people who came up for me were unafraid to push boundaries and to question assumptions, including you, Megan. You want to add anything, Irene?
Thank you. Great, good. Thanks for those shares. Yeah, taking those moments to, remember those people, and then pass it on, let's keep passing it on. I think that, considering this shift of like, starting with a personal reflection, how did I get where I am, lifted up by these people, then how do I use that for collective action? How does that help me mobilize with other people? And I had a couple of examples to share, and I realize I'm not talking about plays, but you get what this is going, right? So, I had a couple examples of people working together to transform culture, which I think is really related to how I think about theater making. But these aren't plays, but these are influential projects. So when I left tech as a grad student, I moved back to Chicago and I got a job at University of Illinois at Chicago. And I was the director of the Gender and Sexuality Center. And we had a program called Safe Zone. And this is a national program. It started, as I understand it, in student affairs. And it was in a direct response to trying to figure out a way to better support students on campus who identified as LGBTQ or were othered in some way. And the program was originally conceived as take a training and then you get a sign or a sticker or a certificate and you put it up on your door, and then that cubicle or that office is a safe zone, a literal location. Then it evolved to being more of a set of concepts. How to create a safe zone in a classroom, how to create a safe zone at a library, how to create a safe zone in your dorm, and a set of concepts that could influence the sort of behavioral expectations or maybe policies that would influence how people were in that space. And then it evolved yet again to more like, how do we equip ourselves and other people to create a sense of safety, which you spoke about, anywhere we go at any time? And what we uncovered was that some of the roots of what we do in theater really apply. Because when we try to learn a new thing or do a hard thing or interrupt, and people talk about this in bystander trainings, it's like, you want to say it, you have the thought, but you can't find the words in the moment. And then it's after it happens and you walk down the block and you're like, I should have said that, We discovered that a lot of people had that experience around microaggressions or witnessing something inappropriate or overhearing or trying to be an ally or an advocate for somebody. So one of the ideas was to practice. What would you say in a situation? And we would bring that improvisation and practice, like what I might say might be very different than what you would say. The words I would use might be really different than your words. But we each have to find our own words if we're gonna stand up, if we're gonna do something, I feel like that's a really powerful concept, goes back to that idea of there's no one right way, right? There's a lot of different ways to do the thing. Once we figure out what the thing is that we're agreed on, that we're trying to do. So how does that concept translate into theater? And I wanted to highlight some documents that have been really influential for me. And this connects also with me now in an artistic director role in a company, but also as someone who works in different spaces, whether I'd be a teaching artist or a director or teaching, these are principles that I could bring. I want to talk about 3 examples and also invite maybe of some other things. Not in Our House, We See You, White American Theater, and the Pay Equity Checklist. These are 3 different but interrelated manifestos that have been such gifts to the field. They are born of rage and disappointment and harm, and they took so much labor for people to work on. They also are created with a lot of generosity and care. They're available for free to study and learn and apply. And I think that they are also visionary blueprints for what to do. So as we think about the change we want to see happen and that luggage that we're tired of carrying around. These are maps that say, drop the luggage, just do this, you know? Which doesn't make it easy. It's that letting go of the luggage, that's the hard part, right? Not in Our House came out of Chicago, but is now a national thing that was erupted after some disclosures and more public revelations around sexual abuses that were happening in a theater company in Chicago that's since been shut down, and opened up conversations about the ways that power was misused in companies. And Not in Our House breaks down definitions of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate kind of behavior in a theater setting, to reestablish norms for everybody that really puts consent first and really respects people's bodies, and created a pathway for all the amazing work that's happening around intimacy and design as a design field. They also included a communication path, so that say you're an actor hired into a theater and something's going on in the rehearsal room and you can't talk to your director, talk to your stage manager. If you can't talk to the stage manager, who do you talk to? A lot of times you don't know who the staff is, or you don't know anyone on the board. The Not in Our House document suggests present a very clear communication path, like an appropriate sort of HR protocol, right? That a lot of other businesses would have, that in the theater, we have gone without a lot of those kinds of caring protections, right? So it's the communication path, like you're a contracted artist with us, we're happy you're here, and also here's the board chair's phone number, you know what I mean? That's transformational. That's really important work. We see White American Theater. I saw some heads nod. I think you're reading that as part of the class, or are familiar with it. This manifesto, framed as a set of demands, came out during the pandemic, calling out white supremacy culture in the theater industry. And it is detailed, it is specific, it lays out benchmarks and pathways, ways to get there. It intersects with consent forward work, with pay equity challenges, but prioritizes BIPOC representation and leadership. And it's an incredible document that that a lot of people responded to, but it's not, it wasn't meant to be a yes, respond and then keep on going. I think it's really meant more as a working document to dedicate to, because it's a long-term plan. It's a vision for the transformation of American theater. So it's something I keep on the reading list. And the third one is the pay equity certification and checklist, which came out of Chicago specifically for theaters, but is used now for other nonprofit orgs. And this does a similar structure around pay equity. So this is a hot topic in Chicago. And I wanted to make sure to bring that into the space of, you know, no more paid internships, which is also in the We See You White American Theater. So if there's no more paid internships, how do you pay people at entry-level positions? What are those benchmarks? Minimum wage debates are happening around the country. Minimum wage is calculated very differently. There's now the MIT living wage calculator that breaks down what it costs to live in different parts of the country. And also, oh, if you have dependents, what does that look like? So the pay equity checklist walks you through that. If you're in charge of a project or an organization, to reason it out. And then you're not isolated trying to figure out, wait, how do we get from here to there? And what does that look like? They also give you opportunities or suggestions of how to communicate out about what you're doing. So I wanted to highlight those three because I think they're really interrelated and they're changing the ground, they're changing the foundation of how we talk about things. Are there other examples that anyone has around that kind of work that you want to call out?
Honor Native Land,
Yes.
a resource that came out of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. A non-existent and totally existent federal department as in it's not an actual federal department, but they named themselves
Yes,
in the absence of one existing,
yeah,
as it should, and they
Yeah.
developed this guide that was, it was focused principally on the concept of land acknowledgements, but it's so much more in a very short guide about it educates about a variety of issues pertaining to Native and Indigenous communities, history, questions of presence, relationship. I mean, it's a brilliant resource. It's so concise and beautifully put together and free.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one that comes to mind. It should was free.
thank you.
Which one's in the title?
Oh, sure. Honor native land.
Thank you,
And
It's
that's
on or not on our,
thank you.
important distinction.
thanks for coming, Kim.
I guess I might lift up, Harold's, they brought us the queer liberatory aesthetic.
Yeah,
Which centers a lot of what do we think of aesthetics? What is the root of aesthetics and what could they be reimagined as?
beautiful. Great. Thank you.
I think many folks are engaging with the challenges and visions of emergent strategy.
Mhm.
For looking at how do we actually engage with these challenges. It's one thing to have checklists, it's another thing to, when we get into the middle of it, how do we keep our balance when we are operating on strictly on a goal-based strategy?
Mhm.
And what you were talking about earlier in terms of what Marty was opening up for you, that the interview is what it is. It isn't the interview, it's in order to get to the other thing. The interview is what it is. Well, emergent strategy has taken that concept and really worked it out.
Beautiful. Right. Great, good, okay. I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on in Chicago. We are like everywhere, I think, in a time of flux and a lot of change and a lot of curiosity. If I think about our immediate context of what I would say the ecosystem of Chicago theaters, many theaters, small and large, have closed since the pandemic, have drastically changed their programs, have completely reimagined how they do what they do. And funding channels are shifting, priorities are shifting around a lot. And it's interesting because there's a combined experience around that of experiencing a lot of loss and a lot of changes in a short period of time. And also a time for some people of absolutely thriving and experiencing this as finally these changes that we've been waiting for such a long time are happening and the new system awaits, the new ideas await. I think about Arundhati Roy's words of the pandemic is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And you talked about the threshold idea. And curious about what this next world is and how we as artists are contributing to it. There's a lot of hopeful framing and theorizing about, the life cycle idea, like organizations can be founded to accomplish a certain thing and be healthy and well and sunset or close, and that's okay. And is that what's happening now? Are we seeing that a lot of organizations have done the thing and now can compost and reemerge in a different way? Why not? Let's see. For those of us who are holding steady in the middle, trying to sustain, every day is a little bit of an adventure right now. At About Face Theater, with our mission, that's so specific, some of that context is political for us. The book bans, the upcoming election, ongoing state violence, the impacts of that on LGBTQ people, is all a part of the fabric that we're working in now. And it's also a time of reinvention and a lot of exploration. And that's what I want to share, is how we're interpreting the mission today. And in my role as the artistic director, I am in a producing role of gathering the resources we need to see a project through to completion. And it takes a lot of creative strategizing. And those of you who have those admin interests get that. Like, it's a really creative position to constantly be balanced. It's a balancing act. How we're interpreting it is in programming a really wide breadth of what queer stories can look like today, for one thing. Just in our past 2 seasons since we reopened into live performance, and I should say we did produce digitally during the pandemic. We paid artists, we raised a lot of money for commissions, we adapted things to stream them online, and then we came back live as soon as we safely could. And some of those projects have been the Magnolia Ballet by Terry Guest, which is set in Atlanta, Georgia, and tells the story of a Black gay son and his dad, and the white neighbors next door, and sort of transgressive love story that happens between 2 young men, but ultimately about this beautiful reckoning between a father and son in the South. And we were really proud to produce that play, and it also got a rolling world premiere, and so it received several productions around the country. And Terry is a treasured member of our community, a terrific artist. We also produced a play called Mosque for Mosque by Omer Abbas Salem, who's also a Chicago artist. We did the world premiere of this play that is based in the story of a Syrian American family who lives in the suburbs of Illinois. They're Muslim, and the son is gay, and the mom spends her time trying to find the perfect husband for her gay son. And it's such an unexpected plot twist in the story that, you know, the mom's not upset and everyone's just wants this gay son to be happy and affirmed. And the challenge of the play is that the presidential election happens in 2016 and the travel ban goes up and this family gets separated. That's what happens. And this play, we partnered with Silk Road Rising, which is a local company dedicated to stories of the Silk Road. And we were able to attract sold out houses through the run for this unique story that I have never seen anything like this before. We produced a 1-person show called Gender Play, created by Will Wilhelm and Erin Murray. And Will performs a lot of the characters from the Shakespearean canon, while also unpacking the queerness and the transness of Shakespeare's writing. And we created all of these ways to pull the audience in, because it's the kind of thing, like, if you love Shakespeare, you get all the inside jokes, but if you don't like Shakespeare, you really do love the play. Like, it works for everybody. But they came up with this amazing concept to give the audience an opportunity to play with gender by putting a costume rack in the lobby filled with these phenomenal, very fanciful capes and hats and garments that you could sort of toss in. And we thought, is anyone going to do this? Will people just think this is ridiculous? When I tell you, it was like a party every night. People would show up, see the costume rack. Are you kidding? I get to wear this? And they would put on these amazing outfits and head into the theater. It was so much fun. We have our current show up called Brightest Thing in the World. It's set in Lexington, Kentucky. And it starts off like a rom-com between 2 women who meet in a bakery, and it's a total meet cute scenario. And they get crushed out on each other, and it's really funny. And then you discover, of course, that they each have these secrets that they've been holding from each other. One of them has a child that she's estranged from. and the other is in recovery from a heroin addiction. And then the story becomes about how families cope and love each other through those hard things. That's running right now. We've got 2 more weekends left in Chicago. And our community partners on that work are public health organizations in the city. So we are distributing Narcan after all the shows and hosting panels and Narcan demonstrations to help people participate in, if you have an opportunity, get equipped. You might be in a position where you could save someone's life if you encounter someone who's experiencing an overdose. So that's the extension that we're finding on this current show. There's a couple of ways that we are also carving out opportunities for experimentation. And when we started, I was talking about relationships and imagination. And here we are, we gather people. That's what we do. And we weren't able to do that for a couple of years. So how do we do that now? So we've come up with a couple of ideas that are really strong programs, kind of my favorite things that we're doing, that are our way of stretching out into that new territory. One is called the Green Room Collective. And the Green Room Collective was born out of the idea of no more unpaid internships. And the name is exactly what it sounds like. It's meant to be that behind the scenes space for you to build your craft and hone your part before you head out into your career. So it's an entry-level staff position for young people who are emerging as arts leaders. They're paid a livable wage to join the staff part-time. And they become a part of our team in everything that we do. They become intricately involved in operations, whether it's on a production or a development campaign or whatever that is. And then they also get to self-select into something that they really want to do. Like, yes, I'll help do this on the show, but also I'm interested in how a grant report gets written. So we offer that back, like an independent study. That's the Green Room Collective. We've had 2 cohorts come through the Green Room Collective so far. And those people are crushing it in the Chicago theater scene. Like, they use the time really well to make their connections, build their networks, start getting those jobs. Funding plug for Green Room Collective. Would love to grow that program. I also want to talk about Regeneration Studio, which was born out of that desire to gather again without the formality of here's a full production, you sit in the audience. Regeneration Studio is a workshop space that's free and open to everybody. Whether you consider yourself a theater maker, or you're interested in the behind the scenes process, or you like plays, or you want to learn about directing, anybody can come, all ages. And it's meant to be experimental and loose and not performative, even for the artists. So we do play readings, directing workshops, we do playwriting workshops, devising and improv, creating original stuff. Whoever is there are the right people to be there. The first year that we did it, we did a series of Saturday play readings where we would say, read an excerpt of a play, and then have a discussion or a crafting project or an improv exercise in response to the themes of the play. Hundreds of people came through for it. So we were like, let's do it again and let's shake it up a little bit. So the second time we added all these other classes, and we're considering a lot of different models of how to keep building that by, for example, hiring a team of curating artists who will design it, and expanding how the workshops work, and building on partnerships to invite people to come through the space, and all that as we grow it. It's that kind of thing. Like I described the youth program, it's build it by walking it, it's find it while you go. And it's a space where we are finding a lot of energy for whatever this next thing is going to be. It also is a great opportunity to get to know plays a little bit better. So last year we read Lavender Men by Roger Q. Mason, and there was such a strong response to the play. We are programming it this season. So that's the next thing we're doing. It'll be a full production to close out this season. The last thing I wanted to share about what we're up to at About Face, and then I want to open it up for your questions and ideas, is that in our history, from before we even started a youth program, touring was always really important to us as a company. Getting out of the theater and meeting people where they are, going to a school, going to a church group, a corporate boardroom, the library, a community hall, getting a touring show that could travel and spark conversation, that could get dialogues going, that could activate some goals for a school or a church or you name it. Touring for us as a company accounted for about 50% of our impact in terms of the number of people that we could reach in a program. It also served to introduce a lot of people, not just to us as a company, but also just to theater. We would get to interact with a lot of people who hadn't been to a theater before or didn't know if it was for them. This was especially important in schools when we would take a show into a school and maybe we would be the first people who would say the word gay in the auditorium, you know, and students would watch the play and faculty would watch the play. And we would have the formal discussion afterwards. And the bell rings or the session ends and everybody splits except the people who stay. And sometimes people stick around after because they really want to talk about something, or they want to connect in a different way, or they have a question, and the tour always has had that opportunity for community building in that direct way that has always made our whole thing whole, has made our whole thing whole. And we were about to launch a tour when the pandemic shuts down. And our current education manager, Dion Adai, was in that touring cast. And they were champions and they pivoted to digital and we streamed that online and that was awesome. But then just this year, people started calling again saying, hey, can you come out? You know, hey, will you come to the library? It was interesting. We first heard from librarians who said, can you come out? You know, do you have a show? Do you have a workshop? Do you have a program? And so Dion came back on board as our education manager and has been developing these workshops. And we are this summer, through a partnership with UIC, we are going to begin devising our next touring show. And I offer that as the seed of hope that you spoke about at the beginning, the seed of hope of what does a touring show need to be now? And what do we need to do this summer to figure out what are we doing with this? How to be helpful, how to be useful, where are we going, who are we connecting with? And that's what we're working on. So I wanted to pass that along as to, and you know, to share and also to invite what you think is coming up next. And I know we've got a little bit of time left. I'd love to just open it up to hear what's living for you. Are there questions? Are there thoughts about seeds that you're planting that you want to mention today? And see what you're thinking about. That spark anything for you?
That's what we have tomorrow. So
Yes.
Like 3 hours tomorrow. So.
Yes.
I can't wait.
It's safe.
That's cool.
There are questions on Zoom?
Yeah, there is one on Zoom from Sheila. Going back to what you were mentioning about the various manifestos that are informing your work right now. She asked, if you see a pattern of white supremacy in your ensemble, how do you address it? And Sheila, if you want to add anything else, please feel free to unmute yourself and add to the conversation.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Real brief, I'm a Black woman And I'm a part of an ensemble. And recently, the white supremacy culture has come up based on the population that we're serving. And the participants are not aware that that's what it is. And I want to know the best way to address it because I am a Black woman.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. And, you know, I having a couple of thoughts about that of, you know, how to bring that awareness to them, but also who should do that, you know? And is that something you need to take on? I don't want you to have to do that. I want you to have someone else who will take that on for you. I think that what's worked for me in my experience is, you know, really setting the table for that conversation of creating the space and the time for the unpacking that might need to happen. What I've had described as maybe a call in instead of a call out, especially if y'all want to stay in ensemble. Is there a way to invite in a conversation that reflects on it and the harm that's happening around that? And then together sort of craft this agreement around like, how do we wanna, what would need to change for us to change direction, you know? I wonder if other people have answers though for that. Like, what do you, does that start to get at it for you, Sheila?
Yeah, that's it's a start, definitely.
I know for me, just seeing the character, there's some amazing stuff online that I think for some white people, and I count myself in that, it can be invisible unless it's reflected like a mirror, you know? And why that moment I described was like a revelation and also kind of a relief of like, oh, yeah, I do experience that as harmful. And yet it also was expected, you know? So finding the right way that's gonna let people absorb it, I think feels important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, John.
If I can respond to Sheila, what you were saying, you're reminding me of another strategy I've seen employed that has been effective in circumstances like that I've encountered, is disrupting the routines in which those kinds of interactions or habits come forward. You know, like committee meetings have a certain structure, and in my experience, some committee meetings are often the place in which that white supremacy shows up. And strategies that's employed, often arts-based strategies, that kind of break that routine and say, we're going to try something totally different in terms of how we relate to each other. And then just kind of trusting how that process makes space for people to communicate what's on their heart and on their minds more equally or equitably can be effective. Because it breaks that kind of adversarial, we're about to have a hard conversation, and instead says like, we're all just going to relate to each other in a different way for the next hour. Can we agree to that?
Love that.
I think there are exercises in theater that put conversation into different languages. I think that's one of the great gifts from Augusto Boal, where dialogue can happen with image rather than word.
Yeah.
To put an image together and then see another image and see a progression and have conversation based on those images rather than an idea. And that's another tool for engaging in what is very, very difficult. I don't mean difficult emotionally. I think that psychologically, socially, to change habits of thinking is hard work. And there's things to be done to make that work a little bit lighter. Rather than just sort of bearing in on the problem to try to fix it in a moment. That's really hard. But I think Megan's nice language of setting the table is really important. In order to take on matters of significant cultural change, there's a lot to be done to set the table, to arrange for agreement on what we're doing and what processes can happen and how just deciding whether we're going to have a podium with a lecture and people seated listening to the lecture, or are we going to be in a circle with allowing each person to have their own authority? Those are things that make difference in setting the table.
Yeah. And Sheila, sorry you're experiencing that,
For sure.
yeah.
We have a note from Irene as well. Irene, do you wanna share, or would you like me to read?
I'll just note, I'm here with my husband, Fred Orlov, and we've both been involved in theater as nonprofit board members here in Richmond. And I'm feeling tremendously grateful for this whole series, for learning about this whole series through Megan, and particularly for today's discussion, because I think the potential, all of our communities are at that threshold of the portal, and whether or not we seize the moment to really create something better and stronger and richer and more inclusive is the question. And we have a wonderful theater community here, and the potential for our theater makers locally to be thinking in terms of the health of our community and where we all help to take it is a really, really compelling idea. And I'm certain that we're going to be sharing this with all of the folks that we know in that arena. So thank you to you all.
Thank you for that.
Really. Irene, have you been part of the Zoom in the earlier sessions?
No, I hadn't known about the series until I'm Megan's aunt. Very proud, rightly proud aunt. And I hadn't known about the series until Megan alerted us that she was going to have this quick trip back to Blacksburg, and that it was something that we might be able to look in on. So I'm glad to know about Virginia Tech's YouTube channel that will enable us to see the earlier sessions, because I'm sure there was a lot of richness there as well.
Reach out. I'd love to know more about your theater and what's going on there. So feel free to reach out.
They'll do.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. It was really wonderful to be here. Thanks for taking the time and sharing everything that you did. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Megan. You've done a very nice thing to bring some very heady conversations in the earlier two sessions. Important, thoughtful, powerful, challenging, and brought it to a specific company doing specific things. So it's a wonderful sequence to have come to full circle here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.